Today, we're going to be talking about the key points from Tuesday's practice for the Chicago Bulls. We're also going to be talking about the most recent coaching update around the Chicago Bulls. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Bazelis slam dunks in games, because in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it, as we're going to start with the key takeaways from Tuesday's practice for the Chicago Bulls as they continue to ramp up for NBA Summer League play starting on Friday. And so we're going to be talking about what Tiago Splitter had to say, Dailyn Swain, and Jaylin Sellers. And so if you want to see the presser, head over to CHGO Sports. It's a 16-minute clip. Once again, just paraphrasing the key points. And so starting with Tiago Splitter. And so Tiago Splitter, I think that the key aspect out of what he said over the last 2 days is that he continues to lay down the foundation and the structure for this team, which is huge, because as you're rebuilding this team up, we continue to talk about how important this is, that you have a strong foundation and a strong structure. And so Tiago Splitter is certainly locked in as far as getting this team set there. And I think that what you continue to hear from the players is that he is holding players accountable. He has clear expectations, which is what Caleb Wilson said yesterday. That is also too what Dailyn Swain said today. And he's also talking about too the passion. And so that is something that Dailyn Swain talked about. And then also too Caleb Wilson, his passion for coaching up this team. And so you love to hear that with Tiago Splitter. He's off to a great start. And the next thing that I got from this presser here with Tiago Splitter today is it seems like that he is going to be willing to really experiment with these players and put them into different situations. And so I love that, because you get a chance to put players into these situations and see exactly how they respond. You get a chance to really evaluate their strengths and weaknesses, which is what Tiago Splitter is very good at, which is player development. And I think that, look, I've talked about this before, last season, that, look, there's only so much that you can do in a practice setting. You have to get players into these game time situations. You have to put them into these situations to see exactly how they respond. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that starting with the NBA Summer League. And then next, it seems like that the Tuesday practice was a bit more competitive. And so you always love that when you're ramping up for a competition. You want the intensity to pick up before you kind of dial it back down before you go into the competition. And so I love that. And then next, talking about the emphasis here on rebounding, taking care of the ball, and playing fast. And so that is something that Tiago Splitter actually talked about in his opening presser here. And so again, just continuing to talk about the expectations for this team. Then next, he talks about helping these players transition to the NBA, because the Summer League is another step. Yes, it's not the preseason. Yes, it's not the NBA season, but it is a step, because you're going to go against players that were in the league a year ago. You're going against players that were top draft picks this year. And you're also going against players that are fighting for roster spots. And so you get a chance to get into some NBA action with the speed and some of the physicality that you're going to face at this level. And so talking about how, these players are going to have to get ready for that transition. And then next, he talks about really with the players and how they want to play and everything else. He says that they have an ideal of really how they want to approach things. He has the idea, but really it's going to come down to getting everybody in camp, getting the chemistry, and then also too, just getting a chance to know the players a little bit more. And so expect for that to ramp up as time goes along. And he does mention Jaylin Sellers. He says that he is playing hard. He's crafty as far as getting downhill into the basket, and he can really shoot the basketball. And so that is very good to hear. Jaylin Sellers, he signed that two-way contract. And so that is great to hear that he's off to a great start. So next, one of the other things that Tiago Splitter talks about is he's talking about Dailyn Swain. And so this was particularly interesting because he's talking about the usage that he's looking to have with Dailyn Swain starting here in Summer League. And so he views him as a big guard. He says that he's a tall point guard that can lead the offense. And so, we've talked about Dailyn Swain being a wing and working off ball. And so I love the fact that he's going to put the ball in his hands and really make him become a bit of a decision maker. And you're counting that he's going to get better with the handles. He's going to get better as a decision maker, which is really going to help this roster and the guards as far as bringing the basketball up and getting the team into the offense. And so, not saying that he necessarily is going to turn into a point guard for you, but the fact that he can work on these skills now in the summer league, perhaps that's going to help him because he can come off the ball, he can get downhill. And so that's just even better for his development if he turns into a bit of a point forward type of player for you. And so that is some of the plans that Tiago Splitter has for Dailyn Swain. And so we can expect to see him playing a little bit on ball here coming up here at the NBA Summer League. And so speaking of which, now we shift focus and we take a look at Dailyn Swain and what he had to say in his presser. And so with him, he talked about once again just showing the defensive versatility. And so I think that we're absolutely going to see that, his ability to play off the ball. And then we get a chance to see, I think, how he is at the point of attack against NBA players as well. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what that is going to look like, with his on-ball defense here at the next level. But he does talk about being a distributor of the basketball because he does acknowledge the fact that, yes, he will have the basketball in his hands. And so he's looking to lead by example. He's looking to make the right reads and things like that and take care of the basketball. And he talked about also, too, that he has spoken to Trey Jones and Josh Giddey, and that he's just looking to help handle the basketball, with these backcourt players that we have. And so he also talks about getting his shot a bit quicker now that he's in the NBA and talking about how difficult it is to get it over, just the opposing defenders and stuff like that. He talks about getting stronger to hold up against, the players that he's guarding. And so he was talking about just the challenge that it is guarding Caleb Wilson and everything else. And so I love where Dailyn Swain is at. I love the fact that he has the ability to really self-assess. And I just love the fact that he's going out there and he's doing it, because one of the things that he does talk about is he says that him and Caleb Wilson, they are getting in the gym at nighttime and they are putting in the work. And so you love to hear that from your young players that are clearly going to be foundational pieces. And so one other thing too with Dailyn Swain that he does talk about is that he talks about how well that Caleb Wilson is doing. And so he says that there is a lot more to Caleb Wilson's game than the athleticism. He talks about the fact that he's knocking down these elbow shots. He said that he's knocking down three-pointers as well at a pretty good clip. And so I'm loving hearing that, because if Caleb Wilson gets off to a great start as a three-level scorer, the Bulls are really going to be trending in the right direction in a hurry. And so that was Dailyn Swain talking about what he's seeing from Caleb Wilson. And so next, talking about what Jaylin Sellers had to say. And so Jaylin Sellers, look, I loved just what he had to say. It was very short. And I love the fact that he's just hungry. It just sounds like that he is just very excited for the opportunity to play, didn't care that he didn't get drafted. He talked about that, look, it's always been a challenge for him. And so it's not going to be any different here with the Chicago Bulls. And so he's locked in. But he said that, look, he's not particularly shooting the basketball very well, but he said he's not too worried about that, that the biggest thing for him is that he wants to be a defensive stopper and he wants to shut off the water. And so I love that when you're talking about shutting down the water of just the offensive player that you are guarding. And so I love the fact that he's coming in with the defensive mindset, because he already, I think, has the shot there to be a two-way player. The question was, could he be a little bit more of an elite defender? And so it looks like that he's very much locked in on that. And so you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking in regards to what Jaylin Sellers had to say, what Dailyn Swain had to say, and then also to what we are hearing from Tiago Splitter as this team gets ready to travel to Las Vegas and start their first summer league game on Friday. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and talk about just the coaching staff updates. And so if you want to read about this, you can head over to Clutch Points. Tiago Splitter hints at intriguing staff changes ahead of the first season. And so within this article, you will see a link to what Casey Johnson had to say. And so this is what he says in his tweet. He says, as we've relayed on CHSN, Tiago Splitter said that he's not done yet with staff hirings. And as for holdovers like Wes Unseld Jr. and player development staffers, Splitter said it's important to keep on guys who know the players well. A mix of guys who were here and new guys is good. And so that gives us a little bit of an indication that Tiago Splitter is still going to make some changes here to the coaching staff. And I talked about this before leading into the hire. Do you keep Wes Unseld Jr. on because he's already started the player development with some of these players? Clearly he knows, hey, this is where we were at. This is where we're trying to get to. And so I do think that intel is important. I think that intel is important to Bryson Graham. I certainly think it's important here to Tiago Splitter as well, because yes, it's one thing to have, your eyes and you see what you see, but the fact that you have a coach that has worked with these players before, it does, I think, give you a little bit of a head start heading into training camp, because you go, okay, this is what they've been doing. This is what they've worked on. This is where they were at with the weaknesses and stuff. Now they collaborate that way and you can get to that point. And so now we will see what happens as this team continues to build the continuity here. But you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking about Tiago Splitter and his approach in keeping some of the coaches here that were in player development last season. And then he hints to the fact that he is not done yet as well. And so you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking there. And look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.